Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Investment Delivery Authority online information session. My name is Rebecca McPhee, Deputy Secretary at Investment New South Wales in the Premier's Department. I'd like to acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to the owners of the countries that you're all joining us from and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today. So this morning's session is going to run for about 45 minutes and it will be recorded and posted online after the event. So let's start with a quick round of introductions of the presenters who are your Investment Delivery Authority members. So Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Beck. I'm Simon Draper. I'm the Secretary of the Premier's Department and convening the Investment Delivery Authority.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Gellibrand, Chief Executive of Infrastructure New South Wales. Welcome everybody.
Ken,
Good morning everybody. Ken Morrison's my name. I'm the CEO of the Bradfield Development Authority, standing in for Kirsten Fishburn, who's the Secretary of the Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, who's on leave at the moment.
And our fourth member of the Investment Delivery Authority, Michael Cook-Strotter, Secretary of Treasury, is an apology for today's session. So, look, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day for this discussion on the IDA. As I'm sure you're all aware, as part of this year's state budget, the Treasurer announced the creation of an Investment Delivery Authority to help make New South Wales a more attractive place to invest by cutting through red tape and coordinating across government. We're pleased that the IDA expression of interest is now live with the portal accepting applications. And the first expression of interest round calls for projects in data centres and technology, renewable energy and energy security projects, and hotels. And the first EOI round will be open for 4 weeks and closes at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 27th of October. And today we're here to provide an overview of the IDA, its purpose and the EOI criteria, and then I will ask the panel a number of questions, which some of you have submitted in advance of today's session, so thank you to those who did that. But first of all, I'm going to pass to Simon to give an overview of the role of the IDA and an explanation of the EOI criteria. Simon.
Thanks, Rebecca. Well, first of all, what it is we've heard from industry and the reason why we're doing this. The first thing we've heard is that there's a huge enthusiasm to invest in New South Wales. There's big opportunities and we want to respond to that. We've also heard there's a lot of big investments, but a lot of those investments are happening inside the buildings and the facilities that are being constructed, not just the actual structures and the infrastructure themselves. And that's an important message to us. We know that a lot of major projects are exposed to government decision-making and public investments, and we know that timeliness really matters. Big licks of capital being played out here and in competitive environments, and sometimes things are so fast-moving that any delay means that the facilities that are being built may become somewhat out of date by the time they're completed if they're not done in a timely way. We also know that New South Wales is not the only place to invest, and we want to make sure that it is a good place to invest. And finally, probably the biggest reason why we're setting up the IDA in that context is that we know that finding your way through government processes and critical path infrastructure can be absolutely bewildering, and some of us have actually delivered projects from within government, so we know we've had to face some of the same challenges, and they are many, and they include planning and zoning, public infrastructure including transport, access to land and land acquisition, utility connections and capacity, biodiversity, heritage, Aboriginal cultural heritage, EPA licences, fire safety requirements, and then sometimes intersection with Commonwealth approvals as well as state approvals, so things like native title and the EPBC Act approvals. So that's enough to put anyone off. We want to make sure we help you get through that process. This is, as much as we love you all and we love investors in New South Wales, this is really about the whole of the economy and the whole of the New South Wales community. So it's about productivity and prosperity, and lifting productivity in New South Wales is critical for our economy. So making sure the cost of delivering projects is efficient, making sure the ongoing operating costs of your projects are efficient and the capacity can be realised, and that they've got economy-wide significance. And then there's also another part of the story for us, which is about economic transition. So we're looking to shift into some new industries. Some of our traditional industries are inevitably in decline. We're moving into new energy systems and also new forms of critical infrastructure. The way the IDA will work is that there'll be 3 secretaries and a CEO. There's the 3 secretaries that Rebecca referred to earlier, myself, Michael Coutts-Trotter from Treasury, Kirsten Fishburn from Department of Planning, and Tom Gellibrand as the CEO of Infrastructure New South Wales. We have a secretariat, a group within the Premier's Department that Rebecca leads, and will be resourcing and running this process. We have a number of functions. One of the, probably the first and most important, is recommending projects to receive facilitation and support across all the areas of government that might impact project delivery, which I just ran through a moment ago. Monitoring and oversight of those selected projects to make sure they keep moving, they don't get caught up in processes that should be done efficiently within government. And then broader system-wide reform. So where we're looking at lots of different projects and we see common patterns, making sure that we identify those and we advise government about how to do more general reform to clear those barriers. All those things are subject to all the normal relevant statutory approvals processes and rigorous merit assessment in the planning system. But there's always scope for doing those things more effectively and efficiently, and making sure that all the government agencies involved are responding quickly to any requests that are made of them. We'll be making those recommendations to the Treasurer, to the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces, and to the Minister for Industry and Trade. Each EOI will be assessed on its own facts and merit against the criteria, which I'll run through in a moment. And I just want to assure you that we will do this with integrity, we'll do it fairly, effectively and transparently. The criteria, I think we have published the criteria, but just to run through them, probably the most important thing for us is that they're aligned with the strategic priorities and policies of government. We do want to focus our efforts on projects of significant scale. So an estimated development cost of $1 billion for most projects, or $200 million for hotels or investments in the visitor economy sector. We want them to be of state significance, so they have to be able to be assessed as a state significant development, state significant infrastructure, or critical state significant infrastructure. They need to be primarily non-residential. We've already got the Housing Delivery Authority for the housing sector that's making great strides, and we're getting a lot of response from industry on that, but this one's about non-residential investment. We want projects that can commence quickly. So if something's a long way down the track, that's fine. Let us know in the future when you sort of really need that help. But at the moment, we really want to focus our efforts and resources on those that really need to move in the near future. We do need to be clear on the type of government support that you will need, what sort of facilitation you'll need. We want to be confident that we can make a meaningful intervention in clearing project barriers. And we'd also like to understand how proponents would work with government to help clear those barriers. The projects shouldn't be reliant on government funding, except where that's already secured or with very high certainty of them being secured. There are some investments in some of these areas that are somewhat underpinned by government franchise or by government funding. But generally speaking, this is not a process by which we're seeking proposals for new government funding. We would like proponents to be able to demonstrate they have land ownership for the projects they're doing, or options to purchase land or other long-term land tenure arrangements, and would prefer that they weren't highly constrained by things like fire risks or biodiversity restrictions or Aboriginal land claims or native title claims, so that we know that the project can move ahead quickly. Although if those are some of the barriers you need to get through in your a long way through, then we're happy to work with you on those things as well. If you've made applications in the past in the planning system and they've been refused, we just need to make sure you positively address those reasons for refusals, and we've moved on, so we're not sort of relitigating the same issues that might have been addressed in the past. And then finally, one of the most important things for us is that the proponents who are coming to us have got the experience, capability and capacity to complete the project. We're all about trying to get these projects delivered, and that has to be a partnership both from government and the proponents themselves. That's it from me, Rebecca. I'll hand back to you.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Simon. So I'm now going to run through some kind of grouped themed questions. A majority of these were received via the webcast registration. So Ken, going to you first on some planning questions. Does the IDA process, like the HDA, allow the potential to progress combined rezonings and SSDAs?
The short answer is yes, it does. So under existing legislation, an SSDA assessment is currently able to be undertaken with a concurrent rezoning, although it hasn't been an overly common practice. But in scenarios where a project may require a change to planning requirements to enable it to proceed as a state significant project, similar to the HDA, the IDA will consider on its merits and may recommend to the Minister for Planning to consider a concurrent rezoning.
Thank you. And will the IDA be available to assist any SSDAs already in the system?
That option is open to applicants of existing SSDA projects that meet the EOI criteria. So where a project does meet the criteria, they can submit an EOI to the IDA for support where there have been delays or some other issues which have been unable to be resolved.
Thank you. And will the IDA become the primary assessment body for SSD projects selected through the EOI process? If not, how will it work with DeFi and other regulators to fast track the assessment process?
So the short answer is no. So DPI would still be responsible for the planning assessment of all the IDA endorsed projects. However, additional resources are being recruited to ensure that determinations can be delivered as quickly as possible. And that's a process that's going very, very well. So there will be a dedicated concierge service within IDA to support queries across DPI and other government agencies or regulators. And the multi-agency investment task force will also provide case management support on non-planning related issues.
Fantastic, thanks, Ken. And will changes be made to how the EIS exhibition submissions are evaluated? And the person who's asked this question has given some examples. So, for instance, submissions of beyond 50 kilometres of SSD not counting, or the ability for third parties to appeal development consent to the Land and Environment Court for projects, of course, chosen by the IDA.
Yeah. So look, the normal planning processes for state significant projects would still apply, and projects would need to satisfy all applicable requirements under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, and they may need to comply with other additional legislation or policies as relevant at either the state or the Commonwealth level, which depends on the nature of the project. So the department, which is the Department of Planning, will manage how submissions are treated and appeal rights for state significant projects.
Yeah, thank you. But of course, as Simon mentioned in his introduction, we do see that there's real value and things can be done more quickly and expedited, and all of the agencies aligned.
Exactly.
All right, okay, Simon, a couple of questions for you on the EOI within the process and timeframes. So what's the likelihood and timeframes for industrial and logistics projects to be considered as part of future rounds?
Yeah, the sectors so obviously the sectors we've identified are those you mentioned at the beginning, which is data centres and technology, renewable energy and energy security, and the visitor economy. Particularly the first two of those, they've been identified as critical to the core aim of driving productivity in New South Wales and managing that transition. But we will over time consider proposals from any industry which is really aligned to government priorities. To some extent, we need to learn as we go, and we'll identify how quickly we can move through some of these proposals and sectors. But we'll be looking at other industries or geographic locations and precincts to sort of align with government priorities, and we'll let the industry know as we proceed with that.
Thank you. And what are the timeframes for assessing EOIs, and what's the required documentation for people to submit?
The timeframes we'll sort of advise how quickly we can assess them as we receive them, and to some extent we're learning as we go with this, and that happened with the Housing Delivery Authority when we got started as well. So it'll be governed partly by what we learn, but secondly the level of demand. So we may well have very, very high numbers of proposals, so we'll have to work through those. The types of documentation, there's an online web form which I think we've available to everybody, which sort of tries to capture it all. It's not too onerous for projects, particularly considering we're talking about projects over $1 billion. There are some attachments that can be provided to support the application. Some of them are optional, others are things we're going to need to assess it properly, particularly around financials and other factors. So at the moment, the round that's been opened, we are looking for proposals by 5 p.m. on the 27th of October. We really need those proposals to be submitted through that web form that I mentioned a moment ago. We'll be able to provide you, we've provided a guide on the website as well for how we'll assess them. And you can go into the applications and start them and save them and recommence them at a time later on. But in terms of the time frame required for us to assess them, look, I guess we were hoping we get a lot of proposals and we can help a lot of players. If that happens, it may take us a while to work through them, but we'll be committing ourselves to working really, really quickly as we have done with HDA.
Thank you, Simon. And next question is, you stated that you're initially focusing on tech and data centres. Would that limit a combined application, including a hotel and a data centre proposal, in one precinct being lodged as an EOI as soon as the process opens? So in this example, it's the same landowner and applicant for both.
Yeah, look, that would be pretty unusual, I guess, to have a hotel and a data centre together, but I wouldn't rule anything out, and all power to those who want to try new things. But yeah, look, I think you really just have to meet one of the requirements in the criteria. So if you qualify under either of those categories, I think we'd assess the package. Because if it's an integrated development, then we just treat it that way.
Yeah, and obviously subject to meeting all of those other criteria, like being ready to commence.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Simon. So Tom, over to you. Would the IDA assist a proponent to engage with the Power Authority in bringing forward the delivery of critical infrastructure to unlock the development, for example, of a data centre?
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, the issue that's in that question are specifically the issues that the IDA will need to focus on. So as applications come in, if there are issues that need to be resolved with authorities, utilities, water, electricity, that's specifically what the IDA will focus on. So we will be assisting in that regard. We acknowledge that there are challenges and to an extent some uncertainties coordinating with state agencies, getting necessary enabling infrastructure. It could be navigating the planning system, some of those other related issues that businesses do experience from time to time when they're progressing major projects. So these are all things that we'll be focusing on and ensuring that agencies prioritise consideration of those matters so that they're not shuffled down, they're actually shuffled up. So the IDA will be focused on those issues and problems. And as we go along, we'll probably become more aware of some of the barriers, be they systemic or perhaps common to more, things that might be delaying projects and investments. And then we'll be, as we move forward, working more proactively to ensure that systemic issues, system-wide improvements are identified, and that we start to look at options for system-wide improvements, reforms. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. And, I definitely see this as something that the cross-government task force will be supporting with in the same way that the Housing Task Force has supported the HDA. Okay, so Simon, back to you. Can you please explain the difference between the HDA and the IDA?
Yeah, look, the HDA, obviously the first difference is the HDA is focused on housing, and that's been a really big priority for the government. The other significant difference is the HDA has got a very formal and statutory sort of role in the planning system. So it's got a process of where we're recommending to the minister that something be assessed as state significant when ordinarily it would be assessed by councils under their own planning arrangements. So that's what the Housing Delivery Authority does. It's a very defined planning-oriented process under the EP&A Act. The IDA is going to look much more broadly because we know that it's not only the formal plan, zoning and the development assessment processes that can hold up projects. There are many, many other factors, including the government's own provision of infrastructure and other regulatory and licensing arrangements that can influence it. So we'll be trying to tailor our work in the IDA to the challenges that proponents face.
Thank you. And Ken, can you please explain the different EDC, so development cost thresholds for hotels?
So the government, as Simon said earlier, said that hotel projects would be a priority for the IDA. Obviously, that does need a different threshold. $1 billion wouldn't be an appropriate threshold for hotels, and it's been determined that $200 million is the appropriate threshold. That's really rooted in the New South Wales government's commitment to the Visitor Economy Strategy 2035, which was is fairly recently released. That outlines the need for a diverse, high-quality accommodation sector. To give you some numbers around that, by 2035, New South Wales will need an additional 40,400 rooms, with 75% of that demand concentrated in the Greater Sydney region. So a key action for the strategy is to drive accommodation investment through streamlined planning approvals. So I think these IDA arrangements really sit within that context.
Thank you, Ken. And I'll stick with you on this estimated development cost. So we've had a few questions around how that will be calculated. Can fit-out costs be included, for example?
So the IDA will use the same approach that's currently used for state significant projects. So there is a planning circular here, which is entitled Changes to How Development Costs Are Calculated for Planning Purposes, which is PS 24-002. So that provides the detail about how fit-out costs are treated for various development types. So I'd refer people to that document. And further information about any other specific project requirements that might come down the track will be communicated in due course.
Thank you, Ken. And there is a link to that planning circular in the submissions guide if people didn't get that down. So Simon, back to you. Will there be any changes to the solicited proposal process as a result of the IDA?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. No, there won't be any changes at all to that. The unsolicited proposals policy is designed around occasions when a party wants to deal with government in some way, and they've got a very unique proposition that only they can satisfy. And often it involves the government granting rights or procuring or selling land or something of that nature, providing land access that would only work for one party. This is very different. This is about saying no matter what your project is, even if generally speaking you don't have any reason to come to government for support or financial support, or you don't need a commercial deal with government, but you just need to be able to get through statutory and regulatory processes. You need government support when it comes to public infrastructure and utilities. It's a very, very different proposition. This is for anybody who's got a major project anywhere and may otherwise have no reason to have contact with government. That's where we're going to step in and try and provide support.
Thank you. And Tom, How are we defining the positive commitment to commence, which is one of the EOI criteria?
Rebecca. So the IDA is going to be focused on supporting major projects. That's what we're talking about today and what we're set up to do. And we want to do that as quickly as possible, and recognising that each of those projects will provide major contribution to the economy and productivity. But what we really want proponents to demonstrate as they're coming through that EOI process, that indeed they are capable of progressing in the near term. And I'm not going to try and describe or define what near term means, but demonstrate that you've got the capability of undertaking preparation of the development application in a reasonably short space of time. So I think I'm probably talking to the converted, but that capability to engage with the planning system, prepare the planning documentation, and to progress with development in New South Wales will be important. So we'll look to that, and we're seeking commitments from proponents to demonstrate that. We've published a guide to support EOI applications, and that's on the IDA website, which Rebecca is going to round us out at the end of this morning's session to give you that information. But that's there and it's available for proponents. So please reflect on that when you're putting your expressions of interest in. Thank you.
Yes, Tom, and that gives us some examples. Sorry, my video's gone off, I see. That gives us some examples of the types of information that proponents might provide, things like project plans, financial commitments, etc., in support of that. But, really up to proponents to demonstrate, as you say. And then we've got one final question before we round out. So, Ken, what is meant by not primarily residential?
Well, look, the government wants to make it really clear which pathway proponents should pursue. Simon spoke about this earlier. The Housing Delivery Authority is there for housing-focused projects, and that's operating very well, whereas the IDA is now focused on major private sector investment in non-residential projects. So there's no precise threshold that we're talking about, but and we do recognise that some projects will have a residential component to them, but proponents will need to demonstrate that housing is not the primary focus. So if you have a mixed development, you need to demonstrate that this is a jobs-led focus, not primarily a housing focus. There is the HDA for that housing focus type of project.
Yes, thank you, Ken. And again, we provide a bit more detail in the guide, but we are asking proponents to tell us what the GFA proportion that is given to residential uses is for the development. All right, thank you so much for joining us today to hear about what I think is a pretty exciting new initiative. And look, a link to this webinar and the submissions guide and some frequently asked questions are on the Investment Delivery Authority website. We will request that you direct all inquiries of the IDA through the IDA email address, which is ida.inquiries@investmentnewsouthwales.newsouthwales.gov.au. So I'll say that again, ida.inquiries@investment.newsouthwales.gov.au, or there is an inquiry form on the website. That's going to be the fastest pathway to a response because any inquiries passed directly to the secretaries or public servants will be redirected to their single channel. So with that, I would just like to say thank you again to everyone for joining us and have lovely long weekends.